Hi everyone. We'll just give it another moment because the lobby's beeping fast and thick here, so I think there's quite a few people still coming in. So we'll give it another minute and then we'll get started. Okay, everyone, conscious of time and aware that we're probably the last thing between a lot of people getting out into the sunshine for their lunch breaks. So yeah, we'll get started. Hope everybody has lots of cold drinks and keeps their hydration up as we go along. But as I say, it's only half an hour, so we'll get started. So welcome everyone today to our seventh Lunch and Learn session in the series that RAP has been running over the last few months. It's great to see so many of you on the call, and also we know that there's lots of people watch the recording as well. So for anybody watching after the event, you're very welcome and thank you for taking the time. So my name is Lindsay. I'm a specialist in the food waste prevention team, working on food system transformation here at RAP. And I'm joined today on the call by my fellow team members, Emma and Hugh. So as hopefully many of you know, RAP, you know us already and you know what we do, but I will just give a bit of an introduction today before I hand over to Hamza, who's going to present on the Chancery Lane Project's updates to the Runa's Clause and what it means for the sector. Okay, so food waste is often viewed as an operational issue, but many of the decisions that influence waste are made long before food even reaches a kitchen or the customer. Ordering practices, product specifications, forecasting, promotions, and supply arrangements are frequently established through these commercial contracts. Recognising this opportunity, RAP has partnered with the Chancery Lane Project to update and strengthen the Runa's Clause, which is enabling organisations to build food waste prevention directly into their contractual relationships across the food supply chain. This clause provides a practical mechanism for customers and suppliers to work together to measure food waste, share data, set reduction targets, and collaborate on the actions. While embedding these expectations into the contracts, businesses can move from a reactive waste management process to a proactive waste prevention process. So at the heart of this clause is RAP's commitment to our food waste prevention hierarchy, and it recognises that the greatest environmental, financial and social benefits are achieved by preventing surplus and waste from occurring in the first place, before considering redistribution or animal feed, etc. The clause aligns with RAP's Target Measure Act approach and supports the ambitions of both our UK Food and Drink Pact and also the Food Waste Reduction Roadmap, both helping organisations to improve efficiency, reduce costs, lower greenhouse gas emissions and strengthen supply along the collaboration or through collaboration along the supply chain. RAP's position is clear. Food waste prevention should become part of everyday business practice. And commercial contracts are one of the most powerful tools available to drive this accountability and improve continuous collaboration across the chain. I'm now going to hand over to Hamza, who's going to talk through the clause and what it means for you and your business. We do have the Q&A function available, so please put your questions in. We'll make sure that there is time at the end for those. So thank you, and over to you, Hamza.
Thanks very much, and hi everyone. Thank you for joining this session, and yeah, thanks again to the RAP team for organising it, especially timely during London Climate Action Week, which I'm sure some of you will be at. And of course, yesterday the UK hit the hottest day ever recorded in June, but I'm sure I don't need to explain the significance of that. Although I do hope that wherever you're sitting, you're feeling cool and comfortable. My name is Hamza. I'm a legal engineer at the Chancery Lane Project, which is also sometimes referred to as TCLP. I also have a background in legal design and have been at TCLP for coming up to 5 years now. Actually, next week is a 5-year anniversary. My background is not in food supply chains, but actually some of the most interesting and impactful work that I've been working on has been in the food and ag sector, which is actually how we started speaking to and collaborating with RAP in the first place, and then on food waste. So for the next 10-15 minutes or so, I'll just walk through our work in terms of what we do and why we focus on contracts, and then also how we're tackling food waste through commercial contracting at scale, and then some takeaways on how you can start to implement it within your work as well. As Lindsay said, we have time for questions. I know it's a webinar, but it's also nice to make it as conversational as possible, so please do put them in the chat. We'll filter them as we go. And if there's any that we aren't able to answer, I'm always happy to have a follow-up call or reply via email. So just quickly, if you haven't heard of us before, we help organizations realize a green, fair, and inclusive economy using the power of legal documents and processes, which I'll get into more in just a moment. But essentially, where current legal processes lock unsustainable and often unjust business practices into the global economy and commercial practices, we really leverage the role of contracts and legal documents to challenge those norms and ultimately change them as a crucial mechanism to driving positive social, environmental, and economic change and transformation as well. We work with lawyers and business professionals and a range of impactful organizations, from sector experts like RAP to legal AI companies, and we do that all over the world in order to realize our ambition and our mission. So could the next slide, please? Sorry. So I thought it would just be worth just covering food waste from a problem perspective and why it matters. Lindsay already outlined some of that, but the starting point from our perspective is that while food waste obviously is an important environmental problem, and it's also a commercial challenge as well, especially at the supply chain level. So just to run through some high-level stats that really demonstrate the sheer size and scale of the problem, but also the opportunity as well. So the first one you see on the slide there is over 1 billion metric tons of food is wasted globally every year. And I also like to think of that from a systems and a sustainability perspective. But what that tells us really is that is a structural failure of how we produce, buy, and sell food, and that happens all over the world. Another lens that you can look through it is a financial risk level, and food waste actually costs a company on average between 1.6 and 4.2 thousand pounds per tonne of food waste. I think that can vary depending on the sector, but ultimately and fundamentally, that is an additional and often unnecessary cost that does appear on the balance sheet. And then finally, through the lens of decarbonisation, which is the main focus of our work, we know that reducing 1 tonne of food waste prevents nearly 4 tonnes of CO2 from being produced. So again, what that tells us is that food waste is definitely a climate issue, but it's also a cost issue and an efficiency one as well, all at the same time from a company perspective. The good news, though, is that actually we don't need new strategies or standards to start taking action to tackle this problem, and that's really thanks to organisations like RAP. But what we can start to do is using our understanding of the problem and the data and the frameworks and the standards that are available, and start to operationalise them through supply contracts, so that we can actually deliver both the financial and the environmental benefits of reducing food waste. Okay, next slide is coming. So as I mentioned, we focus on the role of contracts because they're a powerful and scalable mechanism for driving climate mitigation or decarbonisation, but also a range of other issues like adaptation and resilience and wider social environmental issues as well. And food waste is really no exception to this on a global scale. And our position is that by baking food waste reduction into supply chain contracts, companies can actually translate to be honest, the really good intentions that they have, or perhaps the industry commitments that they've signed up to, into something that is measurable and enforceable, and crucially something that both the supplier and the customer are accountable for, but in more collaborative and shared responsibility terms. And yet, just coming back to that more kind of meta point, we believe that by changing how we write contracts, so for example, hard coding food sustainability and food waste reduction into them, we can actually align global economic activity with really ambitious and really powerful and transformative climate and nature action. And one of the ways in which we do this is providing free tools for lawyers, sustainability, procurement, supply chain, finance professionals to implement that into their contracts. And Runa's clause, which I'll turn to now, is one of those resources that we've made accessible in order to do that. So one thing I should mention just now is this question gets asked a lot. Why is it called Runa's clause? So all of our clauses have both a legal and a technical name. If you've been on our website before, if you go onto after this, but they also have a child's name. So they're named after a child close to the original drafter. So the person who drafted Runa's clause initially gave that name. And as Lindsay said at the start, what Runa's clause really does, it takes the Target Measure Act framework from the Food Waste Reduction Roadmap, essentially translates that from a framework into legally binding contractual commitments. And the goal here is to really rebalance the relationship between food producers and their customers in an effort to make it fairer for producers while giving both parties, as I mentioned, that kind of concept of shared responsibility for ensuring that food isn't wasted. In terms of what the clause actually commits the parties to, it creates a set of practical ongoing obligations for both the customer and the supplier. And just to run through some of the key provisions within there, I'm sure there's probably not that many lawyers on the call, so I'll try to keep the legal language as accessible as possible. But obviously within there, there's a commitment or an agreement to minimize and reduce food waste. And in doing that, there's a measurement aspect, so measuring and recording the food waste generated, and also a requirement to share that data, again, in a really collaborative way. There's also kind of record keeping in relation to that measurement, and really outline the steps that have been taken to reduce the food waste. A really interesting one is from an accountability point of view is the kind of requirement to host regular meetings at least every few months between sustainability teams, but other people involved as well, which I'll speak about in just a moment, to really review progress against the food waste reduction targets that have been set. And finally, if a really interesting one again, if a customer rejects goods, they must do so promptly so that supplier has a chance to sell or redistribute them before they actually become waste. Oh, sorry, someone's just going. No. I'm really sorry, everyone. We're using someone else's offices this week, and they were just trying to get in. Anyway, back to where I was. Can we go back to the last slide? Sorry, Lindsay. Yeah, sorry. So just finally, so those are a set of provisions included within the clause. And one thing I just wanted to mention that this clause was developed in England and Wales. So actually encourages, as I mentioned, to use RAP's UK best practice guidance, which is in the reduction roadmap. But actually many of the legal concepts and the principles are transferable and repeatable in other jurisdictions. If you are on the call and you're operating elsewhere in the world, or if you have supply chains, for example, within the EU. And in the next slide, just wanted to share a quote because it's very easy, I think, to kind of conceptually share these principles and obligations and say that we make it an open source clause available on our website. But really translating the theory into practice is something that has happened. So this clause is being used in live commercial agreements, and hopefully that kind of supports and encourages people in the room to start their adoption process as well, as the overarching objective is to ensure these principles become a sector standard not just at an individual company level, and not just in the UK as well, but looking out to global supply chains too. But acknowledging adoption and implementation is very difficult. So just taking a few steps back, what I wanted to kind of close with is some actionable ways to get started on this. So as you'll see in the slides, there's 3 of them, and they're kind of 3 relatively simple entry points. And the good news is that none of them really require starting from scratch. So the first one on the slide there, internal alignment. This is really about getting your house in order, and that means ensuring responsibility for measurement frameworks, who attends meetings, what target setting actually looks like for you. And one thing that's really important to kind of stress here is that this is not just a sustainability team project. This has to work across the company enterprise, and that's including legal, finance, procurement, supply chain, commercial teams, and of course the board as well. So yeah, one of the provisions that I mentioned in the last slide, a very simple one, is around kind of regular joint meetings to review progress against the targets. I think within the clause that mentions specifically sustainability, doing that, but in order for sustainability to do that, it's going to require data and reporting from across the company, not just sustainability alone. So only really works when it's done collaboratively. And in fact, the vast majority of organizations that have successfully implemented our work always kind of come back to that point about how crucial cross-enterprise collaboration is, and how actually the clauses themselves can be actually a useful mechanism to frame and aid those conversations as well. So the second one is around targeting new contracts. So again, when you look at the clause, there's some blank square brackets, which are really kind of the finer details from a commercial and a business perspective for you to kind of discuss and agree on. So for example, things like what the actual percentage reduction target is going to be, or how often you meet to review progress. But it's critical that you kind of don't dwell on the details in a way. So agree a starting position and take an iterative approach to refining it over time, because the clause does provide those collaborative and kind of feedback loops to understand whether it's actually working or not. So in other words, don't let perfection become the enemy of the good here. And third, horizon scan for contract renewals as well. So if you're reviewing an existing supplier contract, that's often one of the easiest ways or the moments to introduce new terms into the commercial relationship. So really explore whether food waste is a natural add-on to conversations you're already having with suppliers or planning to have with them. And for both new contracts and renewals as well, there's a point around kind of targeting the right contracts and really prioritizing where the biggest impacts can be made. So another useful starting point, maybe just a kind of contract mapping exercise between different teams across the organization of looking at which contracts are contributing to food waste the most, as again, implementing the provisions there, or even piloting them can be where the biggest impact can be made. So hopefully these are useful kind of starting points for getting the ball rolling, going back to your organizations. And we look forward to hopefully sharing future examples and best practices on how the clause works in practice that emerge across our network, across RAPs as well, as I think that kind of cross-sector sharing of what's working, what's not, and really why that's the case is really important and valuable at a community and a systems level too. And finally, just to wrap up, of course, Runa's clause is free to use. It's available on our website, and we'll share the slides around, so you can click on that, but it's a very easy website to find. Beyond food waste, TCLP has a wider range of legal content that covers decarbonisation, which I'm sure a lot of you are looking at, and also kind of more food specific issues like deforestation free supply chains. Again, if you're looking ahead to the EUDR, we have some guidance on that. And whatever challenge you're kind of facing within your supply chain at a sustainability level, I'm sure we have something that's going to be relevant and useful. And kind of building on that, we have a legal engineering and digital teams that are available to speak to your legal teams who would like support with embedding our content into the platforms they use, and really kind of implementing our content into your knowledge management frameworks that can be accessed by anyone in the company. And looking ahead, kind of beyond food waste, the RAP collaboration has been really fantastic. And what we like to do now is explore kind of further opportunities beyond food waste, and looking at food related content that we actually don't have within our collection, but are needed to really drive the sector forward. So for example, we've already started looking at kind of developing contractual frameworks or interventions at a water management level for nature and biodiversity issues and food packaging as well. I think that was my last slide. It was. So yeah, thanks very much for listening again over lunch and when it's very hot. So yeah, I'm very happy to take some questions.
We've got a couple of questions then that have come through. Do you have to use the clause in its entirety, or can you pick and choose which parts are most relevant for your business?
That's a great question. You don't need to copy and paste it into a contract, and in fact, that rarely, if ever, works. Again, businesses are very specific needs, supply chains, level of ambition, level of maturity, capacity, resource, all of these things. And yeah, so it's a bit like an a la carte menu. You don't need to get everything on it. You can choose the bits that work for you or are tailored to your palate. And yeah, again, I mentioned this earlier. One organization within the food network actually that has successfully implemented our work did give an example of how they use the clauses almost as like an educational tool and a translator between legal and sustainability and other teams as well, because there is that kind of, especially with lawyers, kind of speaking in different languages, where sustainability might understand the technical and the scientific and the standards terms, but getting that and translating that into contractual language like this is a difficult thing. But our clauses actually help to kind of facilitate that dialogue and improve the understanding of how it's possible. And again, as well, Runa's clause is quite an ambitious clause that does a lot. If you're kind of earlier on in your maturity level or not sure where to start, you can maybe take some of the less ambitious or easy to implement provisions as a starting point, and as I mentioned, kind of iterate from there.
Thank you. And then, so there's a question around how do we start this with our suppliers, and how do we make them aware of this clause? And also someone's asked kind of who are we doing these contracts with, and it is basically your supply chain. But yeah, how do we get started with our suppliers on this?
Yeah, essentially it's your supply chain. Again, the organizations that have used our work the most successfully and the most effectively have had really strong and robust supplier engagement processes, and a very similar way to how we kind of co-developed this content between us and RAP's network. I think it is this work needs to be co-developed between you and the supply chain. Especially if we're taking a more ambitious approach. It just means later on in the process, it's more likely to be actually negotiated and agreed in. And in a way, I mean, part of the real value and the impact clause is kind of leveling the playing field between you and suppliers, and kind of really promoting collaboration and shared responsibility for these issues. So it's really about getting them on board as early as possible. You might want to, for example, once you've done that kind of internal alignment piece and decided what direction what you take, what the ambition looks like, and what provisions you're actually going to implement, then run a set of workshops, for example, with your suppliers on food waste as a wider issue, and have the contracting aspect part of the agenda for that. That's something, that kind of workshopping, code development of the approach is something that the organisations do use as well.
Great, thank you. And obviously you mentioned that, you know, this was developed alongside our pact signatories and our working group, but were there any particular lessons that stand out from that practical experience in the way that it has been written?
Yeah, I think the main one I think is actually just how enthusiastic people were about contracting as approach within the group. As I've covered, although it's a really powerful tool, it is complex. It's quite difficult to understand. Within that group, there wasn't a lot of, if any, kind of lawyers in the room, which are kind of a key or critical stakeholder within this. But actually, what worked really well was the sustainability people or the procurement people within the group actually involving their lawyers and sending the work over to them. So yeah, really good co-development between us as organizations, but within the network itself, it was just good to see that alignment and discussions between the different stakeholders that are needed to make this work.
Yep. Thank you. So that looks like all the questions that we've got. So back over to Lindsay then.
Thank you so much, Hamza, and for all of those great answers to those questions as well. Kind really brings it alive. We'll make sure that the case study from English Provender Company is shared as well, which covers what Hamza has mentioned here as well. So yeah, with that, I'll just thank everybody for attending today, and let everybody now go and hopefully enjoy some of the sunshine away from their desks or wherever they all are, whether yous are at London Climate Action Week or whatever. But thank you for taking the time out, and again, Hamza, thank you so much for the great insight into Runa's clause with us today, and also what the Chancery Lane Project does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.